Just want to welcome everyone to our presentation today on community group financial planning. I'm Nick Marshall, for those of you who don't know me. I'm the community group support officer at Council. And yeah, decided to be bringing this presentation on behalf of Council's community recovery team. And really pleased that we're joined by Crane Whiteshire's resident community group financial expert, Simon McCary. And Simon works really closely with Council's financial team as a financial consultant and accountant. And in his spare time, he's a treasurer of a number of local community groups. He's been around the region for the last 10 years and been across, I think it's 11 groups. Is that right, Simon?
Yeah, that's right, mate.
How many at the moment?
It was 13 pre-COVID. I've actually dropped 2, so it's 11 now.
Okay, just 11. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So obviously, yeah, great to have that sort of experience here tonight. And yeah, I'll throw to Simon at various times throughout the night to sort of give us his sort of experiences as a community group treasurer. Also joined tonight by Leanne Shaw, who's our volunteer support officer, and she'll be looking after sort of the technical side, supporting me on that side. She's right across the Zoom thing, so if you have any questions in regards to Zoom or anything, throw them Leanne's way. And also really fortunate to have Shana Whitehand, municipal emergency management officer, and she looks after the community recovery team. So really thankful that all you here to join us here. Just a quick bit of Zoom housekeeping. I'm sure most people are across it now, but if you've got any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat function, and we'll come to them as we can. And if we don't address them straight away, we'll definitely address them at the end of the session. For the duration of the presentation section, if you're happy to keep your microphones on mute until we come to sort of the open question time discussion, that'd be great. I suppose the added bonus of coming to this session live is that you have that opportunity to ask some questions of us, particularly when we've got people that have a lot of experience in the region. So that's really good benefit. As I noted before, the session is being recorded as well, so don't feel like you have to take a massive amount of notes or anything. And the slides and the templates and the resources that we discuss will also be made available after the session. So as I said, don't feel like you have to scramble to make notes. And if you are watching the recording and you have any questions for us, Leanne and myself's contact details will be available at the end of the session. So as I said, feel free to get in contact with us when you can. So I'll share my screen here and jump into the presentation. Can everyone see that easily? Easy, thank you. So I suppose the purpose of tonight's session is the presentation is to give community group volunteers some ideas, advice and guidance on some benefits and the basic principles of financial planning and management, and essentially just making it easier for community group leaders to make informed decisions about sort of financial management and future goals for their groups, and just help think about some strategies that might help with long-term sustainable success and viability of your community groups, especially as we sort of begin to emerge from restrictions and lockdowns of 2020. As maybe some of you are aware, with the nature of webinars, it can be a bit hectic with a lot of information flying at you. So I suppose with any webinar, it's key just try and take a few key notes away. And obviously, if you need to come back, we've got the recording available for you tonight. So tonight's presentation, just a brief overview, will approximately the presentation side will go for about 30 minutes, give or take, and just give you a brief snapshot of some of those guiding principles of community group financial management that we've sort of identified as being important. We'll start off with a bit of a brief background on regarding the current COVID climate and how it has impacted groups locally, and why financial planning can help with that sort of financial recovery and community group recovery in general. 3 key areas that we'll sort of establish in regards to the financial planning will be that financial goal setting, budgeting, and then monitoring and reporting on those budgets. And we'll also have a bit of time at the end to chat about fundraising in a COVID environment and how that's sort of a changing space as we're sort of familiar at the moment. Obviously, we'll have some time at the end for a few questions. Should be plenty of time, hopefully. And also the final section of the presentation there is called the parking lot. And essentially, if you're not familiar with that term, it's a term that's I've sort of come to be familiar with this year. refers to a space where we can just sort of look at any other questions or queries that maybe we didn't cover in this session, or anything that we might need to come back to at a later date. So yeah, look forward to getting into it. So yeah, moving right ahead. So as some of you may be aware, Leanne and myself have been in contact with all community groups in the Shire to get a sense of how clubs and organisations and community groups have been coping during the lockdown and restrictions. And obviously one topic that sort of predominated some of those conversations were to do with group finances and how to manage those under the current circumstances. It's fortunate that many groups were sort of able to remain in a fairly stable space, but obviously there are a number of groups that were hit relatively hard. So this sort of led us to do a bit of research and looking into some of the fundamental financial ideas that can support community groups as we sort of return to that COVID normal space. So I suppose when we were asked, when is a good time to consider financial management? The simple answer to that is anytime, but obviously given the nature of the current COVID environment, now's a really important time to begin sort of considering your group's financial position as sort of being, if we are proactive in this space, in this financial space, you can help your club sort of develop strategies that will allow them to sort of remain stable, even if you're not able to operate in that sort of normal operational capacity. Next little question I've sort of got is, who's responsible for the financial plan? And many people would sort of on instinct say is it the treasurer's responsibility? But the reality is effective planning and responsibility for financial planning is the entire committee's responsibility. It's got to be a team effort in that sense. The treasurer may be responsible for collecting some of the financial information and reports, but the decisions made around financial matters should be a collaborative effort by the entire committee. And we'll talk a lot tonight about making informed decisions on finances and financial position. And these informed decisions, should be discussed and made by the entire committee. I might just throw to you quickly, Simon. Maybe you could just give us a bit of an insight into your experience as a treasurer and maybe some of the key responsibilities that you sort of have as a treasurer.
Yep, no worries. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, and as you said, the treasurer's got a few key responsibilities. So at an AGM, you generally table the financial statements, you make sure they get lodged with Consumer Affairs, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, as you highlighted, the whole financial responsibility of an organisation actually lies with everyone. So that's right. The treasurer has a few formal things, reporting of information, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it is a kind of committee-wide, organisation-wide culture of the place as to how the finances actually flow. So no, good point, mate.
Fantastic. And I suppose moving on from that, I suppose if a community group is beginning to think about its financial future and in the current environment, it's important to consider how the current circumstances have impacted your club group directly. So thinking specifically about what incomes and what expenses have been impacted, and especially things like fixed costs that obviously are annual costs that can't be avoided. So things like your utility bills, and potentially some groups have insurance they have to pay or affiliation fees they have to pay. And in a lot of cases, community groups will lease a venue that they have to pay a landlord or another community group for that facility. So yeah, considering all these sort of options when we're considering our finances, obviously COVID has impacted all those things. So to assess the financial impact of COVID on your club, it's really important to closely review your group's annual financial report for the year just gone, because this year's financial report can, for many groups, be seen as a bit of a base report, or almost a sort of a worst case scenario, I suppose. With this information, you can make informed assessments and estimations to what next year might look like. Probably important to note that when we are looking forward to the next year, being sort of conservative with our predictions for expected revenues and maybe exaggerate our predictions for expected expenses, just so we have that budget buffer. Another little quick point in terms of finances and COVID is communicating with your financial stakeholders. And when I'm talking about financial stakeholders, referring to people like, from a revenue point of view, your members and your sponsors and your supporters, who obviously bring money into your community group. And then on the other side, the expenses, so referring to suppliers and creditors, so providers of sort of utilities, for example, so gas, electricity, water, insurers, and again, maybe your affiliation fees or insurers, or renting of a facility. So communicating with those people as well. It's important to remember that everyone has been affected by the pandemic financially. So it's important that we communicate with these stakeholders, these financial stakeholders, to keep everyone informed and up to date on your community group's financial position. In particular with suppliers, as this will hopefully, if you have an open dialogue with your suppliers and creditors, you can potentially negotiate deferrals or reductions of payments, and obviously that won't happen if there's no sort of dialogue there. Again, Simon, I might throw to you just quickly here and maybe ask about some of the experiences you've had this year, maybe communicating with your creditors or suppliers to negotiate the.
Yep. Yeah, perfect example. Yeah, you're right, Nick. I mean, it's definitely critical to get on the front foot and have those chats early on. So perfect example is I'm the treasurer of one of the local music groups, Universal, and so we rent a space and we play music from one of the local churches. And obviously early on, we knew that we went into lockdown, we weren't going to use that space. So just talking to them about sorting out the rent for those couple of sessions we got in early in the year, before we did the lockdown in March. But then talking to them about what's that going to look like for the rest of the year. Are they expecting a rental payment even though we're not there? So it can be a little, it can be a tough conversation to have. But as you mentioned, we're all in the same boat. It's not just like unique to us or Corangamite or Australia. We're all affected around the world. So it's just having, being open to that conversation and getting it early, I think. So yeah, good point.
No, fantastic. No, thanks for that, Simon. I suppose in the same communication is really crucial with your members and with your sponsors and your supporters. I suppose many community groups this year have been pretty generous and sort of waived things like their membership fees, or have not sort of sought out sponsorship because they don't want to put any more extra pressure on the community. But there will be people out there that are still happy to contribute funds to your community group, but they need that opportunity to do so. So communicating there provides that opportunity for them to contribute funds, I suppose, to the group. And we'll discuss a little bit at the end of the session regarding ways of raising funds and fundraising in a COVID environment later on. But what I want to really emphasize here is maintaining communication with all financial stakeholders so that they're really clear with the expectations and how everyone's coping under the current setting. So moving right along into financial goal setting. I suppose the initial part of financial planning is setting out what your group are hoping to achieve financially. This is a really important step for the committee as a whole, again, to take part in, as it gives the group purpose and direction in seeking funds. It also adds to your group story, I suppose. Raising funds just for the sake of raising funds is not generally a good motivator. If you've got a bit of a goal that you're heading towards, it provides a lot more motivation. And obviously there are a range of goals. So there's short-term goals, which I'll talk about here, and obviously long-term, and even just regular sort of day-to-day ongoing viability of the community group goals as well. So in terms of short-term, in the short-term response to COVID, for example, some goals for community groups may include assessing your current financial position and sort of beginning to prepare a plan to a COVID normal operation. So as we mentioned before, with speaking to creditors or suppliers, potentially there might be, if you negotiated things with them, they might have a short-term goal might be for you to pay them back or arrange the payment plans. And then in terms of the COVID recovery, things that maybe we didn't have to consider previously normal years. So things like hygiene products, so sanitizers and signage and cleaning products and additional equipment so that we can reduce the sharing of equipment. So these are additional sort of costs that maybe we didn't have to factor in previously, but now under the current circumstances, in the short term, we have to sort of consider them as short-term goals. And obviously there's other short-term goals that can be considered at other times as well. So funds for minor repairs and equipment in general and facility maintenance and strategy planning for community groups. There's also long-term plans. Long-term goals may include community groups who are looking to contribute to major facility developments. So many facility upgrade grants require sort of a one-to-one funding or contribution of funds by applicants. So these can be projects that require significant saving before the group can approach sort of funders or seek financial backing from council or other government authorities. Also groups that are seeking to be debt free. Obviously a lot of groups some groups at the moment have obviously undertaken a bit of hardship this year and maybe facing a little bit of debt that they can plan long term to overcome, I suppose. So that's another long term example of a long term goal. As I mentioned before, some ongoing goals that sort of day-to-day viability of the community group. So a really simple one might just be that to ensure the group ends the financial year with a positive bank balance, which is, again, that's a pretty simple one, but gives the group a sense of purpose and sense of direction for that year. And in terms of the sort of long-term sustainability of groups as well, groups might seek to develop an emergency cash reserve. We spoke to a number of groups this year who had savings put away for things like facility upgrades and that sort of thing, but they had to dip into those savings to cover the operational costs because of this year they weren't able to utilise the spaces as normal. So in order to develop a bit of financial security for your group, developing a plan, an ongoing goal to create a bit of an emergency cash reserve is another sort of ongoing goal to promote that financial stability within your community group. So as far as actions are concerned, and there's a few actions I've got sort of placed throughout the presentation that give you a bit of idea of how to approach these things. As a committee, assess what short and long-term goals, as well as those ongoing goals the club has, and identify the finances required to achieve these goals. So that, taking that forward. And that's what goes forward into the budgeting. So with financial goals in place, it's now best practice or a good idea to think about how and when the club might financially achieve these goals. So when we think of community group finances, generally the first thing that comes to mind is that annual financial report. And the annual financial report is an essential tool in managing club finances. It provides really good information on the current financial position of the club, where expenses were spent and where incomes were received. And it captures a really significant financial moment in time, I suppose, for your community group. The only minor limitation of it is that it tends to only look backwards. It acts as a bit of a reflection of the year, and only as a comparison can it provide any sort of guidance for the future. So this is where a budget is really useful. So a budget is designed to complement an annual report, as a budget uses sort of financial information from previous years to provide an estimate of future financial position and direction. And again, I'll throw to you, Simon. Have you sort of had, what sort of experience have you had creating budgets for community groups, and what are the sort of benefits that you've seen come from them, I suppose?
Yeah, definitely, Nick. I've created quite a few this year. I've just come from an AGM where we did a budget for next year as well. And I think you're going to touch on the future in the next slides, but ultimately looking at some different scenarios, worst case scenarios. We're all pretty confident we're going to go back to a bit of a norm next year, but what that looks like is going to be interesting. So just playing around with some of the groups of their income. If we don't hit the mark on what we normally think our income is, we're starting to look and talk about how can we actually adjust our expenditure. Simple things like rents, utility costs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Can we talk to some of those creditors, as you mentioned, and talk about repayment plans? Because if we don't hit the mark on that income, it's going to make the year a little bit more tough. So we're just trying to get in early and plan ahead early. Yeah,
no, fantastic. No, thanks for that, Simon. And I suppose budgets might sound like it's sort of a complicated process, but I think you can sort of simplify them a little bit. And I'll show you a few sort of a hypothetical budget in a template, which I've made the template available, and I'll make it available to those that are watching the recording as well. A good way to sort of determine the layout of a budget is to have it match the regularity of committee meetings. This will be important in the monitoring phase of the budget as well, which again, I'll address in a couple of slides time. So a number of community groups meet sort of monthly or quarterly. So that's a good way to sort of lay out the monthly budget or lay out a budget. As mentioned, a budget uses sort of historical financial information to estimate costings and incomes. This includes financial reports or bank statements and receipts and invoices from previous years. And as you'll see in the examples, it's important to note what money has been received or gone out, and also when that's occurred as well. So as I said, important to review your financial records, those bank statements, the financial reports, and the receipts and invoices. So as an action, really encourage community group committees to seek out the financial data from the past, such as bank statements, financial reports, receipts and invoices, to estimate budget expenses and incomes for the coming year as they sort of expect them to arrive. Just while I'm moving, I'll just move to the template to show a sort of demonstration of what it looks like. While I'm doing that, Simon, why don't I get you to maybe comment on different types of programs that people might use, or even just if different approaches people use to create a budget, or programs that are available.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, depending on the size of your organisation, there's heaps of options out there. You can do, your big, larger scale clubs might be actually on like a MyOb or QuickBooks or Xero or something like that. Like an online cloud accounting software will actually help do the budget for you. Excel spreadsheets, nice, easy way to do it where you're using technology to your advantage. But the other option is too, like depending on the size of your organisation and the computer skills of your group, old-fashioned pen and paper can sometimes be just as good. At the end of the day, if it's meeting the needs of the group, that's the main thing. So if everyone's happy with it, it could be a simple whiteboard session where you're just writing some of this stuff down and jotting down notes. At the end of the day, budgets don't have to be lodged with any formal bodies like consumer affairs or anything like that. That's your actual stuff. Budgets are really for the benefit of the committee and the organisation. So if it's ticking that box, you take whatever approach works for the group.
Yeah, fantastic. No, again, thanks. That's all. I think that's really good point. I think if you can keep, it's all about making it easy for your group.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. That's right. So as you can see from this template, I've used Excel for this example, and this is the first template that I'll show you. And basically, it's a brief comparison of the years gone by, the financial years gone by, and our sort of estimations for the year to come, I suppose. So as you can see, 2018 and 2019 have fairly similar incomes. And again, these are all hypothetical figures. You can sort of ignore the figures to a degree here. I've sort of just made them up as is appropriate. And as you can see down the bottom, the expenses, the outgoings for this scenario, the 2018 and 2019 years, they ended up with a fairly significant surplus budget, or positive report. And then we moved to 2020, and again, I've exaggerated the example here a little bit, but just to demonstrate that discrepancy that has probably existed for a number of community groups this year. We can see that obviously incomes are significantly reduced, but then there's still those fixed costs for many groups. So things like the utility, water, gas are things that groups still have had to pay or had to consider this year. And as a result, there's been a negative net position at the end of the year. So when we utilize this information, we can start to plan ahead for the next year. And again, this is a example, as we sort of mentioned before, things are starting to move towards that COVID normal space. So we are expecting a little bit of activity. But again, I've been conservative here in the predictions for this particular community group. So we'll take the memberships line, for example. In 2018 and 2019, they're around 5,000, for example. And in 2021, I've been a bit conservative here and said 3,500. And I think, Simon, you probably mentioned a little bit, and I've got some examples of different scenarios, but maybe just can you talk to a little bit towards the idea of creating budgets for different scenarios and what might happen if things change?
Yep, definitely. So a couple of groups I've been with this week, actually, Film Society. It's another one, Crangamite Film Society. We did a couple of different situations where if we don't get like what our normal membership would be in a normal year, what that budget looks like. If they only got half the membership, and we actually looked at what if we actually waived fees altogether to kind of give people a bit of a freebie, what would it actually do to the bottom line? Like I said, that net position. And that could be a thing groups look at as well, like actually cutting a bit of slack for some people if, it has been a tough year for some people from a financial point of view. And what does it do to the organisation? Like you, in that example you've got, they go back $700, which might sound terrible, but if you've got a good, healthy bank balance due to good financial management over the last decade, whatever it might be, that might not be a bad thing if you're just cutting a bit of slack to your members. Every organisation is going to be in a different situation. All their members are going to be in a different situation. So we did a whiteboard example. I had Excel up on the screen, and we just did 3 different scenarios, kind of full membership, half membership, and no membership, just to see what it kind of looked like. And then under the no membership model, talk about some options of how do we cut back expenses in that case. So
yeah, no, fantastic. I suppose that's our predictions for this year using those previous the information that we've recorded from the previous years, and yeah, having a bit of an estimation. I have got some other templates here for a prediction for a bad year, for example, where again, if we go to the memberships line here, I've shown that the membership numbers are again reduced significantly, and we see how this sort of impacts the end of year budget. And then again, a worst year or a worst case scenario, again, sort of replicates what we've had this year, I suppose. But yeah, I suppose key takeaway here is using that previous information to develop your budget for the next year. The next spreadsheet I want to show you here is the layout for the entire year. So this one demonstrates how a spreadsheet will look across the year of 2021. So our budgeted prediction for 2021. So as you can see in the top left-hand corner, this yellow square, that's our starting bank balance for the club, or for this particular community group. And if we scroll down through the month of January, we can see that they're not expecting to have any income for that first month, but there's still some expenses expected. So things like cleaning, for example, or electricity, that are those sort of fixed costs that they have to consider. And so if we look down at the bottom of this, at the bottom of January, we can see for that month, they're expecting a net loss of $380. If we take that across to the next month in February, we can see that February, the estimated starting bank balance for the start of February is $380 less, so just under that $7,000 mark in this instance. And if we track that column all the way across, we can see that in here, the final number here, that's our projected bank balance for the community group at the end of the year, based on this budget. And if we track down this column here, we can see the totals for each of the items that we've budgeted for and costed for. And in this instance, the total revenue is $11,000 for the year, and the total expenses is $10,860. So as far as the year 2021 is concerned for this community group, the budget sort of expected to be the net profit for that year is expected to be $140. And again, we're expecting that these budgeted figures are being fairly conservative, and that the expenses are being sort of exaggerated slightly, so that you're getting that budget buffer a little bit. I'll just jump back to the PowerPoint quickly. So those again are the slides that I've got there. The spreadsheets, sorry. Again, those spreadsheets are available at the end of the session. So with your budget in place, the next sort of important step is to consider the monitoring the progress of the budget against the actual figures that come to hand. So the best word for this is it's called sort of variance reporting. If there are major discrepancies between the estimated budget and the actual cost and expenses, then the group can assess these differences and look to see why it occurred. So if the differences look like they will impact the end of year budgets, this allows the community group to make adjustments and informed decisions about how they can account for any significant variances. I suppose understanding the explanations for the discrepancies allows your community group to make appropriate adjustments to the budget as well. So I'll demonstrate again how that might sort of look on the templates that I've got. But obviously, without the sort of regular reporting, whether it's monthly or quarterly or biannually, it can be difficult to make those judgment calls from meeting to meeting. As I go to the spreadsheet, I was wondering, Simon, can you sort of speak a little bit towards the ideas of how in depth the reports need to be, or and how frequent you've used in your instances?
Yep, definitely, mate. And once again, the frequency of reporting, the monitoring and reporting stuff back to a community group is going to depend on the community group. So I've got some groups, perfect example, our little music group. They love to go and play music. Everyone's doing a Gold Coin donation each week. They're not really interested in getting a report week or month or anything like that. We normally don't do one during midway through the year, and then the big one at the AGM, obviously. Whereas I've got other community groups that, so Rock the Clock's a perfect example. The Rockabilly Festival in town, we got a heap of grant funding last year. Obviously didn't happen this year for our event, but last year. So from RDV, Regional Arts Victoria. So all of a sudden that reporting is a bit more critical because you've got to report back how you spent that money back to these state government organisations. So that's where reporting happens each kind of meeting. Even if it's not an in-depth report, it's probably like a bit high level report, but each month you definitely give a bit more of a detailed report. So it is going to come up to the individual organisation. I imagine if you kept putting up a finance report more regularly and members didn't want it or committee didn't want it, they tell you pretty quick smart. So it's just kind of fitting in what works for you. And that can change throughout the year. You might get an intense grant for 3 months. You might have to do regular reporting and then no one's really interested until you're kind of getting towards the end of the financial year. So it's just working out, the any regulatory requirements and requirements of your group.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I suppose when we look at the budget here, in terms of reporting and monitoring that progress of the budget, for example, if we look again at the memberships line here, if we go to February, perhaps in February next year, the community group doesn't have that $1,000 that comes in via membership. So let's just drop that to zero, for example. And immediately you can see that the projected outcome for the financial year is $1,000 less. And the total income or the total profit for that year is negative $860. So you can see the immediate impact from that initial report. And obviously getting the information gives you that opportunity to then adjust the budget in your expenses and adjust your spending as well. So potentially, if you have acknowledged that there's less money coming into the community group, then you can adjust other expenses. So potentially, if there's less members, for example, maybe you don't need to spend as much on club merchandise.
I think the important thing about Nick's model, guys, is, as he just said there, you can actually, with your spreadsheet, it's a really good one because you can actually do some scenario analysis stuff. So perfect example he did there is he took the income out of February and it straight away flowed onto that bank balance in the green column on the right-hand side. So you can it's a really quick way to show your committee. And a lot of us are treasurers and have probably got a bit of finance experience, but not everyone does. So it just shows them really quickly how that bank balance can get affected so fast. So it's a good little model because you can kind of play around with it with your committee or your organisation on the fly as they throw ideas at you. So it's a good little spreadsheet, Nick.
Thanks, Alan. And again, I'll be sharing this at the end of the session for anyone that wants it. So that sort of, in a nutshell, summarises those sort of three key aspects of the financial planning aspect of the presentation. And we'll sort of transition now a bit to thinking about how we might sort of fundraise in the current environment and raising those sort of.
Can you talk a bit about the value of why, for a small group like that, is it still recommended to do a forecasted budget for the year, or are you just better to track along and just kind of make do?
Who's jumping in, Nick?
Yeah, jump in there, Simon. Thank you.
Completely agree, Shana. So there's plenty of groups that I think we're all members of that are quite small, and even on your larger groups, you generally find it's only a few key people we all know that are doing the brunt of the work, so it can be quite full on. That's exactly right. You don't want to do large scale budgets where you've got to do reporting back constantly and things like that. Nick's spreadsheet's fantastic because it's a template ready to go. So you're just dropping your data. That's really good. But as I said, it could be as simple as just a whiteboard exercise. I think it's just, I understand sometimes it's a bit of a burden on a committee, but it could be as simple as a half an hour discussion just to go through, all right, like you said, let's just go look at cash. This is what's in our bank account. If we don't get any income for the rest of the year, do we have enough for those kind of regular bills? You're going to have regular rent. You're going to have regular utility costs. It costs money to lodge your financials with Consumer Affairs each year. You kind of got those few key costs that between the committee, they're probably going to flesh out pretty quickly, even if it's high level. And, you round up. If you think it's $100, let's go 110, things like that. As Nick mentioned, building a buffer in your budget. I just think it's probably good, prudent financial information, because the biggest risk at the end of the day is that an organisation, we're all in these volunteer organisations, they're all incorporated entities, and we all need to make sure that they're financially viable. There is an obligation, a requirement under Consumer Affairs regulations that as a committee you're supposed to make sure it's financially viable. If it's not, the harsh reality is it might get to the stage where as a group it winds up, or you might need to call a special meeting to talk to your members about that, because that could be a hard issue. And I imagine in this current environment, there'll be organisations like that, in particular in Melbourne, that are being closed down probably a lot longer than our regional groups. There'll be really hard meetings and discussions where that's probably had, where a lot of groups potentially may have to fold. So completely agree. It's a lot of burden sometimes in a small group, but I think just a simple conversation about it just means that it's front of mind, just to work out what is the future looking like.
So as sort of mentioned in that reporting as well, that final action there is a committee to review regular budget reports to track the progress of the finances and give yourself a chance to address any shortfalls that are forecasted by that budget. So fundraising in a COVID environment, community groups we've noticed this year have been really conscious of placing further hardship on the community and have therefore resisted the urge to undertake any major fundraising initiatives. From my perspective, at least, community groups are really the heart and soul of communities and are really pivotal to community recovery. So their survival and their ability to thrive during these times is really crucial to community resilience. And I suppose it's understandable to think that maybe it seems inappropriate to do fundraising during a pandemic, but there will be members, as I sort of mentioned, or people in the community that are still really keen to offer their support and offer their funds to support these really crucial community groups, and they just need that opportunity to do so. So fundraising is obviously really a key initiative to this. So if you are seeking to fundraise, it's important that you communicate the purpose of this fundraising. So tell the story of your group, as we sort of mentioned earlier. Why is it important, and what is the money raised sort of going to achieve, and what's the aim that is being to achieve? And that again speaks to our sort of financial goals and our financial aspirations for the group. It sort of gives, adds that idea of sort of meaning and significance to the group. Just quickly touch on a concept that I've come across a few times over the last few months is differences between raising funds and fundraising. So raising funds is about funds received from people within the group. I suppose the main purpose of fundraising is to reduce the financial impact on your members or your community. So if every time you have a fundraising activity and you only draw funds from your members, you're essentially just raising funds. To turn raising funds into fundraising, a good strategy is to use your members and the networks and their various channels of communication to seek to seek funds from outside the immediate group. So using their networks to seek funding from outside the group. The classic example is using members. The classic example is a raffle. So rather than selling raffle tickets to your members, using your members to sell raffle tickets to people beyond the initial community, I suppose. And we'll sort of discuss how we can approach this in a COVID safe way on the next slide. In regards to memberships, as I mentioned earlier, many groups have sort of waived membership fees because of financial hardship many people have experienced, but there are still members of the community that want to offer funds to your club, but don't have the opportunity to do so. So even just providing opportunities, whether it's via a donation box or via an online donational link that the club provides, people will be keen to offer their funds if they're given that opportunity. I think an example I came across this year was the Melbourne Cricket Club, and even though it is probably one of Australia's largest sporting organisations, it's still at its heart is a community group in a sense. But in their instance, they were offered members were sent out renewal notices, and they were offered an option to pay a reduced fee. But the members were also offered the opportunity to pay their full normal renewal fee, and obviously some members did and some members didn't, and it's about sort of providing the opportunity to offer funds that people are willing to do that. So again, as far as actions are concerned, it's really important to use our member networks to reach people outside the group when you're organising fundraising events. So fundraising in a COVID environment, have to sort of take traditional fundraising and do it a little bit differently, and just have to be a little bit more creative in the way we're approaching these things. In terms of social events, with restrictions easing, it is now possible to consider hosting COVID safe events. Current restrictions and guidelines for community facilities and public events allow for 150 people indoors and 300 people outdoors, and no more than 20 in a group indoors and 50 in a group outdoors. And that's obviously dependent on that 1 to 4 per square metre density quotient. So as far as the committee is concerned, staying across the current restrictions is really key to approaching these things. And we've already seen a lot of groups that have taken it upon themselves to be proactive in this space and keep themselves up to date with what's going on. And a lot of them have noted that it is a fairly simple process to create that plan and go ahead and be successful with the events. Obviously, now that we are moving into summer, that obviously helps a little bit with executing outdoor events, and that again, it can factor into the way we sort of plan events. Raffles, again, are still a really relevant and reliable fundraising tool. Under the current environment, it's important to get creative again with how we approach them. If restrictions limit, for example, the number of people that can attend an event, then we can maybe consider how we might be able to share the experience virtually. So again, thinking about using our members to not only sell the tickets for the raffle, but then as they sell them, encourage the people they're selling it to either attend the event, and if they can't attend the event, provide an opportunity for those people to view the event online via a live stream, for example. And that sense of, and providing that extra connection, I suppose, gives people that sense of connection and belonging to the event going forward. Another sort of area in terms of sort of broadening your group's reach, think about other forms of membership. So some people, for whatever reason, aren't able to be active members, for example, former members that have moved away, for example, but they still might have a significant connection to the group, but obviously via their distance or for whatever reason, they can't be a member in a traditional sense. So if we can connect and communicate with these potential members and give them an opportunity to feel that sense of belonging by association, you can fundraise effectively that way too. So the example I use here, for example, I'm a Brisbane Lions supporter, and obviously living in Victoria, I don't get the opportunity to go to a lot of Brisbane games in Brisbane. So rather than paying a full membership, I pay what's called a supporter membership, and I pay essentially it's a reduced fee, and in return I get updates from the club, and I get a small merchandise pack with like a cap or a scarf, and that essentially keeps me connected to what's going on at the club and gives you that sense of belonging to the club as well, which is really important. And again, you can use your members to sort of spruik these alternative funding membership opportunities, whether it's via their word of mouth or via emails or social media, and using those connections to spread to other groups, to other potential members. And the final one I'll talk to quickly is just in relation to grants. Grants is a bit of a tricky one at times because obviously, and could probably have a whole webinar on grants in themselves because there is a lot in them. But probably my one bit of advice here is just broadening your search a little bit. Obviously, government grants are a really common one that people utilise. But looking a little bit further, and a lot of corporate organisations offer community grants. So the example that sort of comes to mind is a lot of the banks will have an annual community grant that they offer. And there's other corporate organisations like Qantas has one that comes up annually as well. And other various corporate organisations have various community group offerings. And the final one is Philanthropic Trusts. So, and there are ones specific to South Victoria that are available, and they offer community grants on a case-by-case basis. Council's Community Group Resource Hub. The Council Community Group Resource Hub provides regular updates on any grants and funding opportunities that are available and applicable in that space as well. So in terms of fundraising in that COVID environment, it is about being creative and being aware of what is available. And on the next couple of slides, I've got some links to the appropriate places and destinations that you can go to get informed and be up to date on all the current information, especially in regards to social events. As I sort of mentioned, these are some of the resources that you might find useful. As I said, I'll forward all the slides and all the material that we've created here to all the attendees, and we'll make them available online as well, along with the recording in the coming days. Just to finish up, though, I'm a bit conscious of the time, obviously. Last slide. So obviously, if you need to get in contact with council in regard to any of these sort of questions, if you have further questions to follow up, feel free to get in touch with myself or Leanne. Our email addresses are there, and you'll be able to find our contact details if you call the council as well. But probably just a last little key little takeaway to finish off with. As I sort of said, fortunately for many community groups in the Shire, finances have sort of remained stable for a lot of groups, and some have obviously dealt with some hardship. But at a time when many things are a bit out of our control, creating a system of financial management that allows you to sort of monitor your group's financial position and trajectory going forward, according to those sort of budgeted expectations, will give your group a great deal of that sort of financial control. So regularly assessing these reports will make it easier to, as we sort of discussed throughout the night, make those informed decisions about your group's future and be adaptable to those unexpected changes.